Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
It was a Wednesday morning when I saw the text from my mom. It wasn't the kind of text you'd expect from a parent, loving and supportive, maybe a have a great day or thinking of you kind of message. No, this one had a cold edge to it, like she'd typed it without a second thought, ready to send it off and move on. The message read, "I'm sorry, but you're not invited to Easter this year. You know why? Your refusal to help Sarah and her husband last month was the last straw. We're done asking. Please respect our decision." I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Done asking? They were done asking? This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about me being rejected from the family. For something as small as refusing to give Sarah's husband, Mike, money again. Not that I ever wanted to help him in the first place. I had made that clear months ago when he came around asking for cash to cover his gambling debts. I didn't even have enough to cover my own bills half the time, but they acted like I had an endless supply. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that had been tied for years, the one I couldn't undo no matter how hard I tried. I was always the screw-up, always the one who didn't fit in. They never saw me as successful or capable, just Cole, the family disappointment. I closed my eyes for a moment and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. After all these years of trying to prove myself, they still saw me as the failure. I could already hear my dad's voice in my head, his disappointment lingering in every word. But this was the last straw for me. I was done pretending that I didn't matter. I opened my email, scrolled to the scanned deed I had saved, and attached it to a new message. There was no need to explain, no need to soften the blow. I wasn't asking for approval anymore, I was demanding it. Subject: regarding the family home. Since you all seem to think I'm a failure, I thought I should remind you of one thing. I own the house you've lived in for all these years. I bought it last year to save it from foreclosure. Attached is the deed. I hit send before I could change my mind, then sat back against the couch, waiting for something, anything, to happen. My pulse was still hammering, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me for who I really was. Maybe they'd respect me, or at least acknowledge the fact that I wasn't the screw-up they always made me out to be. The phone buzzed only minutes later. It was my dad. He was calling, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation. It wasn't just a phone call, it was a reckoning. I took a deep breath and answered. "Cole?" My dad's voice sounded strained, like he had already been processing the news for longer than I'd given him credit for. "What is this about the deed? What are you talking about?" I leaned back into the couch, eyes still staring at the phone screen. The deed was real. This was my truth. "I bought the house, Dad. I saved it from being lost. It was all at risk, and I couldn't stand by and let that happen." There was a long pause. I could hear my dad breathing on the other end, the silence stretching between us like a rope pulled tight. That's not possible," he finally said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "How? How did you even afford that?" "I've been running a real estate business for years, Dad. I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to be dismissed. But it's real. I own properties, apartment buildings, even some medical offices. I've built an empire, and I've been doing it all on my own." Another long silence followed, but this time it was different. It wasn't filled with the usual judgment. It wasn't filled with dismissive comments about how lucky I was or how I should be more humble. It was just quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fight for their approval. Finally, my dad spoke again, his voice quieter, softer. "I didn't know. I never knew any of this." His voice wavered. "You've been doing this all along and I didn't see it. I'm sorry, Cole. I didn't realize what you were capable of." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from frustration. It was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a mixture of sadness and relief. "I'm not asking for an apology, Dad. I just want to be seen, not for what you think I am, but for who I really am." "Cole," his voice softened further, like he was struggling to find the words. "I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I never showed you that before." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't much. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was something. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a sliver of respect. Maybe it was all I would ever get, but for now, it was enough. "I'm not doing this for your approval, Dad. I'm doing it for me. For once, I want to live my life without feeling like I have to prove something. I just want you to respect me." I do, he said quietly, the words carrying more weight than any of the apologies I'd expected. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, then hung up the phone. I didn't wait for another message or another call. The ball was in their court now. I had done all I could. The phone rang not long after I hit send on the message. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. I already knew who it was, my father. He'd been calling since I sent the deed over, but I hadn't picked up. Not yet. Not until I was ready to face whatever came next. I had spent years trying to hide my success, trying to prove myself without ever feeling seen. Now, it seemed that my secret was out. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. "Hello, Dad," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Cole," my father's voice came through, thick with confusion. "What is this about the deed? What do you mean you own the house?" His words stumbled over themselves. "We've lived there for years. How can you possibly—" I interrupted him, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. "I bought it, Dad. I saved it from foreclosure. Your debts, all of it. I paid it off." I could feel the silence on the other end, his disbelief hanging like a heavy fog. My father, David, had always seen me as the underachiever. He was a proud man, and in his eyes, I was nothing more than a quiet, withdrawn failure. I'd never been the son he'd wanted, never the one to impress him. But now with this, things were different. "I don't understand," my dad finally said, his voice shaky. I thought you were just working security somewhere?" His voice cracked as if he couldn't bring himself to believe it. "How did you afford all this? What happened to you, Cole? This doesn't make sense." I let out a slow breath. "I've been running a real estate business for years, Dad. I started small, just buying a few properties here and there. But over time, I built up more. Commercial properties, residential complexes, medical offices. It's all been mine. I've been doing this for years, quietly." Another pause. I could feel him struggling to put the pieces together. I could almost hear him picturing me at some security guard booth, not the owner of several multi-million-dollar properties. He'd always seen me as the quiet, invisible one, never good enough for anything bigger than a small, menial job. The fact that I was telling him I owned the house, their house, was too much to process. "Cole, I don't get it. How could you have done all this without telling us? All this time we thought you were struggling." He sounded defeated, like he had no idea how to reconcile the image of me he had in his head with the truth I was telling him. "You've been running an empire all along?" "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "An empire. I've been growing it slowly, doing everything on my own. I didn't want to tell you or Mom because I knew you'd dismiss it. I didn't want you to keep seeing me the way you always did, as a failure." There was another long silence, and I could hear him breathing heavily. This was too much for him to grasp. I wasn't the underachiever anymore. I wasn't the one stuck in a dead-end job struggling to survive. I had achieved more than anyone ever thought possible, and it was all mine. But, "You've never said anything," David said, his voice quiet now. "We didn't know. All this time, I thought you were just getting by." His voice cracked at the end, and it was like the walls he'd built around himself had finally started to crumble. "I know, Dad, but I was never going to get any respect for it, was I? Not from you, not from anyone in this family. You always treated me like I was the screw-up, and I wasn't. I've been building this quietly because I knew if I told you, you'd just keep looking at me like I was some kind of failure." I could hear my father let out a long sigh on the other end of the line. His voice had softened. "I didn't know, Cole. I didn't know you were doing all of this. You've always been so quiet about it. We just thought you were—" I knew what he was about to say. He thought I was wasting my life, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I'd never amount to anything. But I didn't let him finish. I wasn't going to let him backpedal. Not this time. "I wasn't wasting my life, Dad," I said firmly. "I was building something. I've been doing it for years, and I'm tired of being seen as nothing more than your disappointment. I've worked hard for everything I have, and that includes this house. It's mine. Not just a place to live. It's mine, Dad." Another long pause. Then my father spoke again, his voice filled with a mix of awe and confusion. "I didn't know, Cole. I didn't know. All this time. I thought you weren't cut out for anything big." He sighed deeply. "Maybe I was wrong." "You were wrong, Dad," I said, my voice softer now, but still resolute. "You were wrong about me, but I'm not asking for your approval. I'm just telling you the truth. I've earned everything I've got. and I don't need to prove it anymore. There was silence on the other end for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm proud of you, Cole. I didn't see it, but I see it now. I'm sorry. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting for approval. I didn't feel like the failure in my family. My father had said the words I'd always longed to hear, even though they came too late. But for me, it was enough. The call from Dad left me feeling exhausted, but not surprised. He was still processing everything I told him, and I knew this wouldn't be the last conversation we'd have about it. The house, the deed, the fact that I wasn't just the underachiever they thought I was. None of it was going to be easy for him to understand, and I wasn't even sure he'd ever fully accept it. When the phone rang again later that afternoon, I recognized the number immediately. This time, it was David calling back. I braced myself. Cole? His voice cracked, almost hesitant. I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around it. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I had expected this. What part is confusing you, Dad? I mean, I don't get it. You said you own the house now, that it's your company's, but how is that possible? We've lived in that place for decades. You've always just worked, well, not much, really. There it was. He still saw me as the kid who couldn't hold down a job, someone who didn't amount to much. I've been building a real estate empire, Dad, I said, keeping my voice calm. For years, it started small, just with a few properties, but it grew. And I kept it quiet, because I knew if I told you, you'd think I was just trying to impress you. There was silence on the other end of the line. A real estate empire? I had no idea. David finally said, sounding both shocked and, I realized, a little hurt. We thought you were just getting by, just working odd jobs, trying to make ends meet. Because that's all you ever saw, Dad, I snapped, more sharply than I meant to. You never asked. You never even noticed that I was trying to make something of myself. All you saw was me as the screw-up, the one who couldn't hold a steady job. But I was doing it, building something big, quietly, in the background. I didn't see it, he whispered, more to himself than to me. I thought you were just stuck. I didn't realize how much you had accomplished. The sting of those words hit harder than I expected. How many years had I lived under that shadow, trying to prove I wasn't the failure they all thought I was? Now finally, I had my proof, but it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. I didn't want you to see me that way, I said, my voice quieter now. I didn't want to be the kid who had to keep proving myself, but I've built something, Dad. I own shopping centers, apartment buildings, medical facilities. I didn't ask for your approval. I never have. But I want you to understand that I'm not who you think I am. The line went silent for a long moment. Then his voice, softer than before, came through. I didn't know, Cole. I didn't know any of this. You've been doing all of this, and I never saw it. You've done so much, and I never even asked how. Because you didn't believe I could do it, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. You thought I was just a security guard or something, stuck in a dead-end job. You didn't know I was working 80-hour weeks to buy and renovate properties, to turn them into something. I've been hustling for years, and all you saw was a failure. I'm sorry, he said, his voice small, almost lost. I had no idea. I didn't see it. I didn't believe you could do it. You always just seemed, well, like you didn't have it in you. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to show you, Dad, because I knew you wouldn't believe it. You never thought I could do anything big, but I did it. I built this on my own, and that's why I never told you. I didn't want to be dismissed again. I don't know what to say, Cole, David said after a long pause. I've been wrong. I've always been wrong about you. I see that now. God, I don't even know where to go from here. I let out a slow breath. This was harder than I thought it would be. It wasn't just about proving my success. It was about breaking free of the years of being seen as invisible. I didn't want to make him feel guilty, but I also didn't want to let this conversation slide. Not after everything I had done. You don't have to say anything, Dad, I said, my voice a little more composed now. I just want you to understand that I'm not a failure. I'm not just the quiet kid anymore. I've been doing something with my life, even if you never saw it. I'm doing this for me. Not for you, not for anyone, just for myself. He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end, and I wondered if he understood. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. Finally, he said, I see you now, Cole. I see who you really are. and I'm sorry for not seeing it before. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't looking for an apology, but hearing those words from him, it was something I never thought I'd get. Something I didn't realize I needed. Thank you, I finally said, my voice steady. That's all I needed to hear. I'm proud of you, he added quietly, as though the words were difficult for him to say. I just, I didn't know how to show it. Maybe now you do, I replied, feeling a small knot of relief loosen in my chest. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just the two of us, understanding each other for the first time in years. Maybe this was the beginning of something different. Maybe finally, we could see each other for who we truly were. I'm going to send you a few more documents soon, I said, breaking the silence. I want you to see everything I've built. It's more than just buying and selling. It's changed communities, Dad. I've turned parts of this city around. He didn't respond right away, but the quiet on the other end of the line felt different now. It wasn't filled with doubt anymore. It was filled with something I had never heard from him before: respect. The phone call ended, and I felt a strange emptiness settle over me. My father had finally acknowledged my success, but I knew that acknowledgement wasn't the same as truly understanding. He still couldn't fully grasp what I had done or why it mattered. The years of dismissing me as the quiet, unambitious one hadn't just been brushed away with a single conversation. I wasn't expecting that. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in the same living room where I had spent so many years as the family disappointment, the one who wasn't living up to their potential. It felt odd to be here now, a successful businesswoman, if they even realized that yet. David's words from earlier echoed in my mind. You've always just seemed, well, like you didn't have it in you. I'd spent my whole life trying to convince him I was more than that, but it never stuck. He'd never understood that being successful didn't look the way he wanted it to. He saw it as a job in an office, wearing a suit, talking numbers, climbing some corporate ladder. But I had created my own ladder, and it didn't look like his. The next evening, my father called again. This time, his voice was softer, but I could still hear the uncertainty in his tone. Cole, I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm trying to understand, but I just can't wrap my head around it. I know you've been doing well, but I always thought you were, struggling. I almost wanted to laugh. Of course he thought that. I had never been given the space to show him otherwise. Dad, you thought I was struggling because I was never given a chance to show you the truth. You always dismissed me. Remember the times when you said I needed to get a real job? How many times did you say that? There was silence on the other end of the line, and I realized my voice had become sharp. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. You're right, David said, his voice almost regretful. I was wrong. I didn't understand. All I saw was what I thought was the only way to be successful. Exactly, I said, my frustration slipping away. You thought that if I wasn't working in a fancy office or climbing some corporate ladder, then I wasn't doing anything important. But that's where you were wrong, Dad. What I've built is important, even if you don't see it that way. I see it now, he replied quietly. I see that now, and I'm sorry for all those years of not believing in you. Apology accepted, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. But you don't have to apologize for me. You have to understand that I didn't need your validation. I did this for myself, not for you. I've been doing it for me. There was a long pause, and then he spoke again. I just don't know how to fix this. How do I make it right? I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. You can't fix it, Dad. You can't undo all the years of dismissing me. I've moved on. I've had to move on. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want you to respect me. I do, he said. I do respect you. I didn't understand before, but I do now. I'm proud of you, Cole. I really am. I know, I said, the words coming out more softly now. That's all I needed to hear. As the call ended, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, but I also felt a strange sadness. All the years of trying to be seen, of trying to prove myself, and it had taken this moment, this confrontation, to make it happen. But I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. I was finally, truly seen. And while it wasn't everything I had hoped for, it was enough. The next few days were quiet. My parents didn't reach out again. For once, there was no pressure, no guilt trips, no subtle hints that I should do more or be more. It was just silence, a comfortable silence, for the first time in years. But as I sat down that afternoon, looking at the city skyline from my office window, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. Maybe my family could finally see me for who I was, not as the failure they thought I was, but as the woman who had built something real, something lasting. And in that quiet moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. But there was still more to be done. My father had acknowledged that he'd been wrong, but I still felt the deep sting of those years of misunderstanding. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to say it aloud. I'm not the person you thought I was, Dad. I'm so much more than that. And with that, I took a deep breath, looking forward to what came next. It wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about finally stepping into who I had always been. I hadn't spoken to Sarah in months, not since she'd brushed off my offer to help with her husband's debts. Back then, I tried to be understanding, tried to offer her a lifeline when it was clear her life with Mike was spiraling. But her pride had gotten in the way. She refused my help, insisted she could handle it herself, even though it was obvious that she couldn't. It had hurt me more than I let on at the time. I wanted to help, but she pushed me away. So I stayed silent and watched as her world slowly crumbled. Now, everything was different. I'd built my success. I had nothing to prove anymore, no desire to play their game of constant rejection. But something was still missing. I had made my peace with my family's misunderstandings, but I wasn't about to turn my back on them entirely, especially Sarah. When the phone rang that afternoon, I didn't hesitate. I picked up, knowing exactly who it was. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Cole," her voice was strained, as if she'd been holding something back for a long time. I, uh, I'm sorry. About the last time. I, I should have listened. I should have accepted your help. But I didn't." She paused and I could hear her breathing shakily. I, I didn't know how to accept it without feeling like I was failing. You've always had everything together, and I've always felt like I was the screw up. I swallowed hard. I'd never expected an apology, certainly not one that sounded as genuine as this. "Sarah, you don't have to apologize. I get it now, but I don't want you to go through this alone anymore." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her processing what I said. "What do you mean?" "I'm offering to help, Sarah," I said, my voice softening. "I know you've been struggling with Mike's debts and your medical bills. I want to pay for rehab for Mike, cover any medical expenses you have. I can take care of everything. You don't have to fight this battle alone." There was a long pause. I could feel her hesitation, like she was weighing my words carefully. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I I don't know what to say, Cole. I've been too proud to ask for help, but I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to fix this, and it feels like everything is falling apart." I closed my eyes, picturing her in her small apartment, trying to hold it all together while her world collapsed. My heart softened. "You don't have to fix it alone. You've always been there for me, even when I didn't ask for it. It's my turn now." "I never wanted to burden you," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to admit that I needed help, but I've made so many mistakes. I've let pride get in the way, and I'm sorry for that." My chest tightened, a knot of sadness and empathy swelling inside me. I could hear her tears now, quiet but unmistakable. "Sarah, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do this alone anymore. I'm here for you. I've got you." I I don't know what to say," she whispered, breaking into soft sobs. "Thank you. I don't deserve it, but thank you." "You don't have to deserve it," I said gently. "I'm your sister. You're my family, and that's all that matters." There was a slight shift in her voice as she took a deep breath, like a weight had been lifted. "I've been so stupid, Cole. I should have accepted your help when you first offered it. I was too proud to admit I needed it. But I do. I need it more than I ever realized." "You don't have to apologize anymore, Sarah," I said. "You've learned your lesson. Let's focus on getting you and Mike the help you need, okay?" She sniffled and nodded, even though I couldn't see her. "Okay, I'll let you help. I'll accept it this time. I don't want to lose everything." "You won't," I reassured her. "You'll be okay. I'm not going anywhere." After the call ended, I sat back in my chair, a sense of relief washing over me. I knew this wouldn't fix everything. Sarah still had a long road ahead of her, and I couldn't solve all her problems. But I had done something important today. I had broken through the walls she had built, and for the first time in a long time, we were talking honestly. When I went into the kitchen later, I found my mother standing by the counter, a worried look on her face. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked. I smiled faintly, walking over to pour myself a glass of water. "Nothing's wrong. I just talked to Sarah. She's finally ready to accept the help I offered. It's a start. Mom raised an eyebrow, but there was a softness in her eyes. You've always been so generous with her. Maybe it's time she realizes how much you've sacrificed for her. I think she's starting to, I said quietly. It's not just about the money, though. It's about being there for her when she needs me. As I sat down at the table, I felt something shift inside me. My family had spent so many years misunderstanding me, dismissing me, but today I had made a choice to change things. Not for their approval, but for my own peace. Sarah had finally seen me, not as the failure they all thought I was, but as someone who could help, as someone who truly cared. And that felt like a victory, a real one. Easter dinner was always a battleground in our house. I never expected it to be anything else. Certainly not a chance for understanding or reconciliation. But tonight felt different. My parents, both of them, had agreed to come over to my house for dinner. It wasn't just any dinner, though. This one came with an unspoken promise that we were going to talk, really talk, about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. It wasn't just about Easter anymore, it was about us, the whole family. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to speak my mind. As my mom set the table, I couldn't help but notice how her hands trembled slightly, her movements a little more tentative than usual. I could almost feel the weight of the conversation she'd been avoiding, the truth she hadn't wanted to face. Dad, on the other hand, was unusually quiet. He sat at the table, his face drawn, and his gaze shifted from his plate to me and back again. He wasn't the type to apologize easily, and I knew that even now this dinner was more of a performance than a heartfelt attempt at reconciliation. It was Sarah who broke the silence first. She wasn't usually one for confrontation, but tonight something had changed in her. After everything that had happened, after I offered to help her, after she'd finally accepted it, she was different. She stood up from the table, the rest of us watching her with bated breath. "I've been a damn fool," she started, her voice low but firm. "I've spent so much time being prideful and angry at you, Cole. And for what? I couldn't see the truth until now." She turned toward our parents. "You never saw it either. You treated her like she was worthless when she was just trying to help all along. You let me believe I was the only one struggling." I could feel the sting of her words, but it wasn't the anger that hurt anymore. It was the realization that Sarah, the one person I had always hoped would see me, was finally admitting that she had been wrong. That was all I ever needed from her. To hear her say that she understood, that she saw me. "I should have accepted your help, Cole," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been too proud to admit I couldn't do it alone. But you were always there for me, and I never—" She broke off, tears brimming in her eyes. I never realized how wrong I was. I stood up, walking over to her, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," I said softly. "You don't have to apologize for anything. You've got enough on your plate right now." But Sarah shook her head, her face flushed with shame. "Number I do." I was so wrapped up in my own pride, in my own fears, that I couldn't see how much you were sacrificing for me. "I'll never be able to repay you for that." "Sarah," I said, squeezing her shoulder gently, "you don't have to. All I ever wanted was for you to know that I was here for you, and I'll always be here." Mom and Dad were quiet, watching us with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. But Dad finally cleared his throat and stood up. His face softened with something I hadn't seen in years: regret. "I think we all owe you an apology, Cole," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "For years, we treated you like you were the problem, like you weren't good enough. We never saw what you were doing, not really. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for not believing in you, for not seeing you for who you really are." I met his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the usual tension when I looked at him. I felt relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "You're right, Dad," I said quietly, my voice softening. "For so long, I wanted you to see me for what I was capable of. But I've stopped needing that now. I've done everything I've done for myself. I didn't need your approval. I just needed to know I was doing it for the right reasons." Mom looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting nervously. Finally, she spoke, her voice a little shaky. I think we were just scared, Cole. Scared that if we let you succeed, we wouldn't be needed anymore. And for a long time, we didn't understand that you didn't need us in the way we thought you did. But now, I see it. I see how hard you've worked, how much you've sacrificed." I smiled, feeling my throat tighten with emotion. I didn't want to make anyone feel like they didn't matter. I just wanted to build something for myself, something that was mine. My parents exchanged a look, and for the first time in years, they looked at me with something like admiration. "We've been wrong, Cole," my dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm sorry. We should have seen what you were doing." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm not doing this for your approval anymore, but I'm glad you see it now. That's enough for me." Sarah wiped her eyes, her tears now mixed with a soft smile. "I was jealous, she said, her voice small. "Jealous of how you were able to do all this without needing anyone's permission. I always felt like I had to follow some script, and you did it your way." "That's the only way I knew how," I replied with a smile. "You don't need anyone's permission to build your own life." As the dinner wore on, there was a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. My family was beginning to understand, not everything, but enough. They were starting to see me for who I was. Not the failure they had always believed, but someone who had worked hard, sacrificed, and finally carved out a place for herself. As we sat together, eating and talking more openly than we had in a long time, I realized that this moment, this dinner, wasn't just about me finally receiving the respect I had always craved. It was about us, as a family, taking the first real step toward understanding each other. And that, in itself, felt like the beginning of something beautiful. The table was set for Easter dinner, but the usual cheer and light conversation felt different. For the first time in years, the space between us wasn't filled with old resentments or misunderstandings. It was filled with possibility, with the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to start fresh. The food sat untouched as we all settled into our seats, each of us uncertain about how to move forward. My parents, Sarah, and I, we were finally facing the reality of what had been broken, but there was no turning back. Not anymore. Dad cleared his throat first. He had always been the one to get the ball rolling, whether he wanted to or not. "I've been thinking," he began, looking at me with an intensity I hadn't seen in years. "About everything you've said, about the work you've done." His gaze softened as he met my eyes. "I see it now. You've built something bigger than we ever understood, and I'm proud of you, Cole. I'm sorry I didn't see it before." I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling both grateful and weary from the years of carrying the weight of their misunderstanding. "Thanks, Dad," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "But I don't need you to be proud of me anymore. I've done it for me." Sarah shifted in her seat, her eyes still a little red from the emotional conversations we'd had earlier. She spoke next, and there was a sincerity in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time. "I want to say sorry too, Cole, for all the times I didn't believe in you, for all the times I saw you as different. I was so caught up in my own stuff that I couldn't see how much you were doing, how hard you were working." I looked at her, not with anger, but with something that felt like relief. It was a long time coming. "It's okay, Sarah," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "I know you were struggling too, but I want you to know I never stopped caring. Even when you pushed me away, I never stopped trying to help." My mother, who had been sitting quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap, finally spoke up. She seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of everything she'd carried had finally caught up with her. "I should have supported you, Cole," she said, her voice fragile. "Instead, I just assumed you were making mistakes. I never saw how hard you were working, how much you were giving. I'm sorry." I nodded, feeling the sting of the years they had spent seeing me as less than I was, but I wasn't angry anymore. This was progress. "I know, Mom. It's okay. I just needed to feel like you saw me, for who I really am." And then, without realizing it, I started to talk. Not just about the businesses I had built or the properties I had developed, but about the sacrifices I had made. How long I had spent working late into the night, wondering if anyone would ever see that it wasn't just about the money. It was about more than that. It was about giving back, changing the landscape of a community, helping people who needed it. I wasn't just buying buildings. I was investing in neighborhoods, in families, in futures. The more I spoke, the more I saw the shift in their faces. At first, they had looked at me with confusion, unsure how to respond to the woman in front of them, the one who had managed to turn her life around without any help, the one who had been quietly building an empire. But now, they were listening, really listening. Sarah's eyes welled up again, and this time, it wasn't just regret, it was admiration. "I had no idea, Cole," she said, her voice small but filled with awe. I didn't understand what you were doing. I didn't see it, but now I do. I'm proud of you. Dad, too, was silent for a moment, taking in what I had said. Then, with a small, almost embarrassed smile, he said, I never thought it would be like this. I thought you were just struggling. I never realized you were building something bigger than us all. That's when I realized the change had already happened. My family was starting to see me, really see me, not as the girl who couldn't fit into their world, but as someone who had created her own world, one that was thriving. But even with all this progress, I couldn't let go of the pain I had carried for so long. I had been dismissed for so many years that I couldn't simply erase that hurt. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even angry anymore. But I needed them to understand that I had built this success on my own. And it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me and my ability to prove to myself that I could achieve anything. I don't want to fight for your approval anymore, Mom. I don't need to. I've done this for myself, I said, my voice steady but firm. But what I do need is respect. I need you to see that my work isn't something to look down on. It's important. It matters. My mother nodded slowly, as though the weight of my words was finally sinking in. We understand now, Cole, she said softly. We do. The conversation drifted, but it wasn't as awkward as I expected. My family, though still struggling with understanding me fully, had finally started to see me, not as the girl who could never do enough, but as the woman who had done it all on her own. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't trying to prove myself anymore. I didn't need to explain my worth. They were starting to see it. As the night wore on and we all sat around the table, the laughter began to feel real. My family was no longer looking at me with judgment, but with curiosity. They wanted to know more about my work, how I had turned nothing into something. They asked questions about my properties and ventures, and for the first time, I was able to answer without feeling defensive. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was just telling the truth. For the first time, it felt like I belonged, at that table, with that family, as who I truly was. And as the night drew to a close, I felt a sense of pride settle over me. I had come a long way, and while the journey was far from over, tonight was a victory. Not just for me, but for all of us. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly seen. The morning of the award ceremony, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves swirling inside me. It was surreal to think that after all these years of feeling unseen, I was finally being recognized, not just for my success, but for the community impact I had worked so hard to make. The business I had built, the properties I had turned into thriving spaces, the lives I had helped improve through simple investments, it was all coming to light today. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress and adjusting the clasp of my necklace. My hands shook slightly, but I couldn't tell if it was from anticipation or the weight of the moment finally sinking in. I didn't expect this moment to be as emotional as it was. I had worked hard to get here, not just for me, but for my family, for everyone who had doubted me, and for those who had seen me as a failure. This recognition wasn't just for my business. It was for all the sacrifices I'd made. It was for all the years of being dismissed and underestimated. It was for the truth I had kept hidden for so long. As I finished getting ready, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw my parents' car. They were here, ready to witness my achievements, ready to see me for who I truly was. They had promised to attend, but part of me still couldn't believe they were actually following through. I opened the door to greet them, and when I saw the expressions on their faces, something inside me shifted. My mom and dad looked different. There was a soft pride in their eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Something genuine, something that made me feel like they were finally seeing me as the person I had become, not just the one they had wanted me to be. Cole, my dad said, his voice filled with an emotion I hadn't heard from him before. You look beautiful. I smiled, taking a deep breath. Thanks, Dad. It's kind of surreal, isn't it? That I'm finally being recognized for all of this. Mom stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from my face. It's more than just recognition, Cole. It's proof of everything you've worked for. You've done something amazing, and we're so proud of you. Hearing those words from her felt like a weight lifting off my chest. They had never been the type to express their pride or admiration for my work. They didn't see it as something important until now. But now in this moment, I could feel the truth of their words. For the first time, I wasn't fighting for their respect. It was just there, and that was enough. Dad cleared his throat, looking at me with a little more warmth than usual. You know, he said slowly, I've been thinking a lot about what you've built, and I've realized that I never really understood it until now. What you've done, it's not just impressive, it's important. It took me a long time to see it, he continued, his voice quieter, but I get it now. I've been wrong about you, Cole, and I'm sorry for that. The apology, though long overdue, hit me in ways I hadn't expected. I had spent so many years wishing for them to see me, to believe in me, to feel like I was more than just the quiet kid who could never quite fit into their world. And now, here it was. Finally, I was being seen. I don't need an apology, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I did this for me, but it means everything that you see it now. Mom nodded, squeezing my hand. We see you, Cole, and we're so proud of everything you've accomplished. We stood there for a moment, a silent understanding between us. It wasn't just about this award, it was about everything that had led up to this point, the years of hard work, the sacrifices, the quiet battles. It was about the truth finally coming to light, and about the family who had once dismissed me finally starting to understand who I was. The ceremony was held at the city's Grand Hall, a beautiful space filled with people who had been touched by my work in some way. As I walked up to receive the award, the spotlight felt different. It wasn't the kind of attention I'd been used to. It wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. It was just about being seen for who I was. I took the stage, the applause ringing in my ears. My family was seated in the front row, their eyes on me with a mixture of admiration and pride. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the feeling of recognition, the moment I had worked so hard for. As I accepted the award, my mind raced through the years that had brought me here. The nights spent alone, the doubts, the setbacks, the moments when I thought I wasn't enough. But now, standing there in front of all those people, I felt something different. I felt like I had finally proven my worth, not to them, but to myself. In my acceptance speech, I didn't talk about the deals I had closed or the properties I had transformed. I didn't mention the millions I had earned. Instead, I talked about the community, about the people whose lives had been impacted by the work I had done, about the families who now had affordable housing, the businesses that had been given new life in the areas I had revitalized. It wasn't about the money, it was about the change. As I looked out into the crowd, I found my parents' eyes on me, and I knew. They understood now. They had always seen me as the girl who wasn't enough, the one who would never be as successful as they wanted me to be. But now they saw me as I truly was, a woman who had fought for everything she had, a woman who had built something not just for herself, but for everyone around her. As the ceremony wrapped up, I felt a sense of accomplishment I had never known before. This wasn't just a victory for me, it was a victory for my family, for the people who had doubted me, and for the people who had never believed in me. They were finally on my side. I left the ceremony that night knowing that I had truly come full circle. The road had been long, but every step had been worth it. The ceremony hall was buzzing with excitement as people milled around, chatting and laughing, but I couldn't hear much of it. My focus was on the stage where, in just a few minutes, I would be called up to accept the award for my contributions to the city and its development. It was hard to believe that this moment was real. It felt like I had been waiting for it for so long, waiting for recognition, waiting for my family to see what I had done, and waiting for the world to acknowledge the life I had built from the ground up. As I stood there, watching the crowd, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. All the years of doubt, all the quiet nights working, wondering if I was wasting my time. The family dinners where I had been dismissed, the times I had been told to get a real job. How had I gone from being the family failure to standing on a stage about to receive an award for what I had built? It didn't feel like it was happening to me. It felt like a dream I never thought I could touch. I glanced toward the front row where my parents sat. Their expressions were full of something new: pride, admiration, respect. My dad, who had once doubted every move I made, was sitting straight-backed, his eyes locked on me. For the first time, I could feel his genuine pride in the air, the kind that wasn't earned through expectations but through quiet understanding. And my mom, she had always been soft-spoken, never one to make a scene, but now I saw the smile on her face and knew it was the real thing. She saw me, finally. I wasn't just the quiet one anymore. I wasn't just the girl who could never fit in with their image of success. I had done something on my own, something meaningful, something they could finally understand. The host's voice echoed through the hall, pulling me from my thoughts. And now, to present the award for community development and business excellence, we have Cole Lawson. The applause broke out, and my heart raced. I walked up to the stage, every step feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but I didn't mind. This was my moment to shine, not just for me, but for the people who had always believed in me. And yes, even for those who hadn't. For those who had rejected me, dismissed me, underestimated me, I would show them. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted them to see the truth. I took the microphone, feeling the weight of the award in my hand. It was heavier than I expected, but I held it tight, my fingers curled around the cool metal. I'm honored to receive this recognition today, I began, my voice steady, though my chest felt tight. But this isn't just about me. This award belongs to the people who believed in me when no one else did. The community I've worked to transform, this isn't just a business to me. It's my way of giving back to the people who gave so much. It's about building something that lasts, something that can stand the test of time. I paused, looking out over the crowd, letting the words sink in. I wasn't here to brag about my achievements, to flaunt my success. This was about more than that. This was about everything I had done to help change the landscape of my city. The truth is, I started with nothing, I continued, my voice a little quieter now. I didn't have a handout, I didn't have a silver spoon, but I had determination, I had a vision, and I wanted to build something that mattered, something that could transform neighborhoods, create jobs, and give people a place to live, work, and thrive. And today, that's what we're celebrating. Change. The kind of change that comes from hard work, grit, and never giving up. The applause grew louder, but I didn't focus on it. I focused on the faces in the crowd, my family, my friends, my employees, the people who had been with me from the beginning, the ones who had watched me struggle, watched me succeed, and had always supported me. Even when I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, my parents were clapping now, smiling. I could see the pride in their eyes, and for once, it wasn't about what I wasn't. It was about what I had become. I turned back to the crowd, my words steady, my heart full. I couldn't have done this alone. I've had mentors, colleagues, and most importantly, my family. To my parents, thank you for always being there, even when you didn't understand. I know we've had our differences, but you've taught me more than you'll ever know. And to my sister Sarah, thank you for never giving up on me. We've had our struggles, but today, I'm proud of us both. Tears filled my eyes as I said those words, but I didn't mind. They weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief, of accomplishment, of finally being seen. As I left the stage, award in hand, I caught my parents' eyes once more. They were beaming at me, their faces filled with pride. They had always been the ones to shape my ideas of success, but now they were the ones learning from me. They were the ones who could finally see what I had built, and for the first time, it felt like they understood. After the ceremony, as we gathered in the lobby with friends and colleagues, my dad pulled me aside. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I'm proud of you, Cole. I didn't understand what you were doing all these years, but now I do. You've done something incredible." I smiled, the weight of everything finally lifting from my shoulders. "Thank you, Dad. I just needed you to see it." And as the evening wore on, I realized that this wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for my family, for all the misunderstandings and misgivings we had shared over the years. But it was also a new beginning, a new chapter in our relationship, one where I wasn't just the quiet one in the background anymore. I was finally seen. As I walked out of the ceremony with my family by my side, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment, of peace. My journey had been long, but it was finally clear that it had been worth it.